What's going on, everybody? We've got episode number 6 of the Generation Fit podcast. Benji and Chris here. Today we're going to be going over the complete beginner's guide to supplements. So today's podcast is for anyone who is just starting off in the gym or getting into fitness and they don't know, do supplements do anything? Do they not do anything? What should they be taking to get the best results? And it's also for people who already have a little bit more experience, but they're not exactly sure if what they're taking is doing anything or if they should have a different supplement protocol.
Yeah, I remember prioritizing supplements as the number one part of my protocol for training and nutrition, and only to realize that it only should be supplemental to a sound program and nutrition protocol. So this would be a great guide for you guys to understand what we mean by a guide to supplements and their practicalities with them and what you can do to then use and benefit better for your workouts and whether it be your sleep or your livelihood, but just a guide to help you with that.
Before we start, I just want to let everyone know to visit www.thegenerationfit.com. We've got plenty of free resources, videos, and guides that are going to help you out regardless of what your goal is in fitness. Okay, so let's talk about a very brief history of supplements. I know we could go on about this forever, but it's not too interesting. But essentially, the inception of vitamins and the discovery of them basically started in the early 1900s. There were lots of different kind of diseases and health issues that were going on. There was things like extreme vitamin B deficiencies. The processing of grains destroyed lots of vitamin B in different types of foods. And this led to diseases like pellagra and also to diseases like beriberi. So these were pretty injurious to people. Beriberi led to paralysis. Pellagra led to sores, delusions, pretty bad stuff. And then there was also a vitamin C deficiency across lots of people because of the sterilization of milk with heat. So this led to scurvy among children and affluent families. So some of the initial vitamins were in 1916 with the yeast vitamin and double-strength yeast, iron concentrate, super vitamins. They typically included vitamin B, but not purely vitamin B because that wasn't completely discovered yet. So at first, the medical world wasn't too happy about this because there was kind of extravagant claims on all the bottles and what everything could do. But by World War II in the 40s and then rolling into the 50s, it was normal. It was on everyone's medicine cabinet and it was sold essentially right next to salt and pepper.
Yeah. And then since then, the U.S. Congress passed the Dietary Supplement and Health Education Act, also known as the DSHEA of 94. And at the time, the DSHEA was enacted, an estimated 600 U.S. dietary supplement manufacturers marketed about 4,000 products. More than 29,000 different dietary supplements are now available to consumers, and an average of 1,000 of them, new products, are introduced annually.
Yeah, so it's exploded ever since. I mean, I'm sure that everyone here can testify to the fact that when they go to a vitamin shop or a GNC or just like your average grocery shop, that there's so many supplements that you don't even know where to look or what to get or what to do. Should you be getting them? Should you not? Your medicine cabinet at home is probably stacked with vitamins, but you don't know what each one is for.
Yeah, I remember the first time I walked in GNC and I was bombarded with all of the pretty marketing, the jacked guys on the cover, drink this to get the biggest biceps, or eat this gummy to have 8-pack abs. Anything and everything was marketed to me, and I couldn't imagine as a 16-year-old then thinking to myself, oh, I'm going to buy all these supplements and be just as big as Ronnie Coleman or Stan Efferding and all these the jacked people on stage, and only to realize that years later, it is literally maybe 5% of all of your nutrition and training protocols.
You need to take the special supplements that those guys take. But yeah, no, I agree. I had the same experience when I first started lifting. Luckily, I wasn't too misinformed, but like you said, I prioritized that. I thought, okay, well, if I go to the vitamin shop and I get X, Y, and Z, if I stack up on all the things that the top bodybuilders told me to get, then I'm going to get as big as them because that's what they take, right? That's the kind of the claims that the fitness industry makes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Buy this, you look like me. And then you find out that after years and years of doing this and taking everything in sight, nothing happened. Maybe you should have been prioritizing something else other than supplements. Hence the reason why they're called supplements, actually, is they're meant to supplement your actual diet and what you're currently doing. And even then, in supplement to what you're already doing, most supplements do not work. So the fitness industry makes some pretty extravagant claims about what supplements can do. I mean, there's lots of claims, such as supplements could add tons of muscle and strength to your lifts. Another one is that they could help you burn tons of fat, changing your body radically in a very quick and pertinent way. Another one is that just a big difference between those that are shape and are not are supplement use. And then it even goes as far as saying that the difference between people who train really hard that get gains and train really hard that don't, the difference is their use of supplementation, basic supplements that you can get at any store.
Yeah, the biggest takeaway here is that they monetized the thing that probably is worth the least amount of your investment. And you can't monetize training harder or sleeping better by yourself. So what they do is they found parts of the process where they're able to monetize your performance, your recovery, you name it, better sleep. And from there, they develop these supplements to then help you get there. But then they don't realize is you have the ability to better yourself in these things, or at least understand your body enough to where you can actually optimize a lot of these training and nutrition principles to then further your gains in the gym and in just overall healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about how the industry figured out, okay, we can monetize these supplements because we can't monetize telling people to wake up in the morning, get your vitamin D from the sun, and then exercise in this type of way, and then don't expose yourself to blue light, get a good sleep, and make sure you're eating adequate calories that is micronutrient dense. Like, no one's making money off of telling someone to do that, because then they're going to not actually have the same types of health issues that the average person does currently have in this country, and then there's no profit to make off of that. So a big thing that I noticed when I first started lifting is that there was lots of supplements that I now know it's scientifically proven don't work, that when I would go to somewhere like a GNC or a vitamin shop, they would say, oh, well, this works right here. This is going to boost your testosterone because all these studies say it. And they would actually cite studies that really do exist. But the problem with these studies is that they were completely fabricated and created by the companies advertising and selling these products. So it's not very difficult, these studies, if you just look them up, the studies that some people cite to promote certain supplements, just look at the beginning of the page and look who it was created by, which company it was created by, and you'll see right there that it was created by a company that markets this product. Meanwhile, there's entire meta-analyses of the same product that shows that it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the biggest one that pops out is BCAAs. There was one in particular, and I'm not going to name names just because I don't want to get a lawsuit on this one. But understand that the BCAAs were researched by X company, and they reported that after using X company's BCAA, that their recovery time was shortened for everything by 30 seconds to a minute for every single lift, and they performed exactly the same, which in science, that means that you're able to, let's say, perform a barbell bench press at 135 by 10 reps. You would have to wait about 2 minutes to do that, but instead now you can do 1 minute to do that. And that also means you're able to handle more volume, which is a great claim to have, because that means if you're able to handle more volume, that probably means that you're able to increase volume over time faster. So that is a huge, huge thing to say. And that's why when we hear BCAAs, it's great for recovery. But in reality is, we kind of know now, a little tidbit for later, but we know now that BCAAs are basically negligible in, like, we're talking like 0.1%, and it's just flavored water at this point.
Yeah, well, I think also, and we're going to get into this in a few short minutes, but most of the supplements, including BCAAs, when they do work, it's because you're extremely deficient in something and your diet is not even close to optimal whatsoever. So when we talk about in a little bit which supplements work and don't work, this is very often also in the context of what people's average lifestyle is anyways, because remember, this is meant to supplement what you're already doing. That's why it's called supplements. Another thing, apart from fabricated studies, is just straight up outright misinformation. So not even with the support of fabricated studies, just complete misinformation. So this has been kind of occurring with the inception of the marketing that's done by influencers and bodybuilders and different fitness people, right? Take this and you'll look like me. We just had the Liver King that, I mean, we already knew, but get busted basically for saying to follow his, I think it was 9 ancestral tenets, which actually aren't that bad tenets if you look at each one individually, but follow those and you're going to look like me. You're going to be as big as me, as lean as me. Your abs are going to look like mine. And that's not true at all, guys. Everyone knows that you can't look like that without being on crazy amounts of exogenous hormones, unless you're Ronnie Coleman, which then in that case, maybe you could get away with it. But the point being is, it's just the fitness industry is filled with charlatans, which basically means people posing as something or not to sell something to you and make profit off of it. And that's essentially a very large portion of the fitness industry. So, I mean, what happened with the Liver King is a perfect example. It's just really fucked up to do that to people, to make millions and millions of dollars off of innocent people taking money from their pockets when they're not actually deriving any benefit from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you also have to realize the supplement industry is not regulated by the FDA, and understand the FDA, whether you agree with it or not, does its job by at least regulating supplements and other drugs that we take in. And without regulation, anybody can put almost anything in those supplements, and they don't have to necessarily put it on the label either. So that is very scary. So most of the stuff that you're probably getting is probably not dosed properly. It's probably not clean, and you're most likely not getting the actual supplement that you want, or at its clinical dose. So when we go through this, you're going to understand is that we're going to recommend companies and third-party testers that they bring in and pay for, so they know, and so the consumers know that you're getting exactly what you're paying for.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, and we'll circle around to that at the end, just in terms of protecting yourself when it comes to buying supplements and what we recommend. But some very bad things have happened to people in terms of their physical health. People have died taking things that they didn't know were in the supplement that they bought. So because it's not regulated, it doesn't mean that you're not at fault if you buy it. Not to say, oh, I blame you for buying this thing that you didn't know was in there, but it just shows that you need to be responsible when it comes to buying these supplements, because you shouldn't believe that these big companies and nutrition labels have your best interest at heart when it comes to selling you supplements. Like, these big companies, the person at the top isn't like, oh, you know why I really started this company is because I really want like Chris and Benji to put on more muscle and like reach their goals. No, it's a business. They want to make money. So they're going to cut corners, most of these, and they're not going to get that third party testing. They're going to fabricate studies, and it's going to make it so that you're spending loads and loads of money as opposed to focusing on the things that really matter, and you're not going to be deriving any benefit from them. It's going to be to your detriment, potentially to your health and to your pockets. All right, so yeah, let's get back into BCAAs.
Robert Wolf.
You know who that is?
Yeah.
I don't know who that is.
Robert Wolf. He's the most quoted guy for
Stronger Science
by BCAA for BCAA research.
Oh, BCAA research.
Yeah.
Okay.
He does a good job with it. Yeah. Basically, BCAA's in context does work in a sense of you're taking isolating the three branched chain amino acids, which is leucine, isoleucine, and valine. The only thing is, if you get sufficient enough protein, or you take any supplement with those sufficient 3, and most likely the other 9 total, or the EAAs, essential amino acids, then it's not that big a deal, because you might as well just get that in. So that's why coaches like us are recommending just drink a whey protein shake instead of taking BCAAs.
Exactly. They were, like you said, I think it was in the 90s that certain companies were claiming that it did so much for you. Like, this was the big thing. Like, bodybuilders were promoting it an extreme amount. In even 5 years ago, lots of bodybuilders were promoting it, and then even to today, but it's not nearly as severe. So there's actually some progress there. But one supplement was by Robert R. Wolf. We talked about him a little bit just now, but he found that supplementing or branched chain amino acids doesn't really do anything so long as you are already taking in a sufficient amount of protein anyways. And one of the reasons why it could actually act to your detriment more than your benefit is that the three essential amino acids involved in BCAAs are valine, iso, leucine, and leucine. And all three of those are competing for uptake within the muscle, within the body. So that's actually exhausting more resources to essentially fight against each other to get that uptake, as opposed to when you are actually having all 9 essential amino acids that seamlessly go into your muscle and allow you to grow that way. So that's why there's another study that was done by Castanos and colleagues. See, that's an easy name for me to say. Finally, in 2008, it showed that muscle protein synthesis was greater after ingesting whey protein, which you alluded to just before, when compared to ingesting the same amounts of essential amino acids in isolated form. So there's various studies that also show that they improved lean body mass, but those were heavily flawed and often funded by supplement companies. So like you said before, I mean, it's not a surprise at this point, but the studies that showed that they had a benefit were either fabricated or people were at extreme deprivation of basic protein intake. And even if they were at that deprivation of protein on the day-to-day, they would still benefit more from just getting complete sources of protein in, as opposed to all 3 isolated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the end of the day, the biggest factor here is just getting your protein target in. And once you prioritize that, you've already cleared all these bases for your EAAs and your, this case, BCAAs. But understand that this is negligible and most likely is completely a waste of your money. So in your cases, get your complete proteins in, and hopefully through mostly food.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to go through a few other supplements that don't really work too well for the average person. And there a lot of world-renowned coaches, such as Eric Helms as an example, he places his supplements in A category, a B category, and a C category, meaning supplements that work in regards to pretty much like having gains in the gym. B, maybe sometimes they work, or maybe depending on certain circumstances. Typically, that's when you're deficient or something, or maybe a genetic thing. And C, supplements that basically have no evidence whatsoever to support its benefit to you. And that's pretty much what we're talking about right now, are those C supplements. And I actually have this number here on my screen. It says that the average person spends $819 on supplements per year. So I think the number is $68 per month for the average person. So that means some people are just supplement junkies and spending like hundreds per month. Some people are spending $0. They're probably, if you have to pick a side, I would be the person spending $0 a month. But that's a lot of money, and that's all predominantly going to be on supplements that don't work. You're going to find out in a few minutes here that we only really have 5 supplements in total that we recommend for the average person. And even then, you have to take in your own individual circumstances and see if you really need all 5 of those if you're living a healthy lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. And just to be clear, we're not doctors and we aren't able to prescribe medicine, but just understand that these are just very well-researched information, and working with doctors and other professionals, that these are just recommendations that are of scientific efficacy. So no, we are not prescribing it to you. These are just recommendations.
Yeah, if you ingest like 10,000 milligrams of caffeine, like just like straight up like slam down powder of caffeine, that's on you, not us.
Yeah, so just understand these are all recommendations. And
you know, there's a guy that did that.
Oh yeah, there's a couple guys.
There was a guy that recently like tried to create his own pre-workout.
Yeah,
I think it was in Britain or something. Yeah,
Yep.
and I think he just messed up like the scoop or something. Like it wasn't even on purpose, but he tried to create his own pre-workout, and yeah, he totally overdosed on it and just died at a very young age. It was horrible.
Yeah, so please don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
Measurements matter, okay? Especially with the 10th multiplications of 10, okay? Especially in the metric system.
That's why we don't recommend also creating your own pre-workout with caffeine powder
or any drugs that could possibly kill you. But also that if your doctor recommends something, that we're not telling you to diverge away from it. We're just telling you to think critically and always ask questions, but understand that your doctor is your primary caretaker. So please, by all means, listen to them, but also always question no matter who gives you advice.
Yeah, exactly.
And or recommendations.
Yeah, like just because we're sitting here at this table with professional mics doesn't mean we're right. And just because your doctor has a degree doesn't mean he's right. Someone's right because they're actually speaking the truth. And I mean, that's a hard thing to derive, but that's what makes someone right. You know, like I can't remember which philosopher it was. It was one of the Greek ones, like Socrates or Plato or someone, but they said those who are not their own doctor are a fool. I don't know which one exactly it was that said that, but
it's a good quote.
Yeah, it's a good quote. right? Chris is going to claim that's Confucius for his heritage. But no, right? Confucius is awesome. But yeah, so if you're not your own doctor in the sense of you're not questioning all advice that people give you, all recommendations, because you can clearly see just from the brief history we gave you how people prey on misinformation and your lack of knowledge in order to take money from your pockets and give you supplements that could potentially harm your health or at the bare minimum not help you at all. So be your own doctor in that sense. Not to say that you should just like start injecting yourself with stuff, not in that way, but just in terms of questioning everything that people tell you in terms of medical advice or recommendations. Another kind of C supplement, meaning it doesn't really have much efficacy for the average person, is actually going to be the average supplemental vitamin that people take on a day-to-day basis, or your multivitamin. So lots of meta-analysis have come out in the last few years. There was a really big one in, I believe it was 2018 by David A. Jenkins, and they took 179 different clinical trials, and I think that amounted to 2 million people, and they found that most common vitamin supplements, so your typical ones, like vitamin B, C, and then just your average multivitamin, didn't help or didn't improve all-cause mortality rates, and it didn't prevent any cardiac-related deaths whatsoever. So really, if you examine the literature and you think, okay, like think to yourself, oh, I do have a vitamin C deficiency, I do have a vitamin D deficiency. First, focus on getting that in your diet or your daily lifestyle without having to supplement. And then if you truly have an issue with a deficiency, well, then that's going to help. That's the context where that supplementation does help. So if you're someone that has an extreme vitamin C deficiency, yes, we're not saying that supplementing with vitamin C doesn't help, but most people self-diagnose themselves with deficiencies and they got no blood work done and it doesn't help whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the biggest things with multivitamins is that companies will put in the wrong dosage, whether it's too low or too high, and then what they do is they use vitamins and minerals that don't actually do anything in your body. So you have twofold here. So the dosage isn't correct, so it's not going to do anything, and they also can put a different form of it. And a lot of vitamins have different forms. Like in this case, is like vitamin C, like ascorbic acid, right? Is a lot of it is not absorbable through the body, and it will basically just go out like water. So you have to understand, each company, when you look at something, you have to make sure that they are doing a good job of being hopefully third-party tested. They are putting the right dosage amount for each vitamin and mineral on top of using the right vitamins and minerals in their products, which is a lot to look for. But that it's also a good thing then, because that means you can screen out 99% of bad products. And multivitamin in this case, is alluded by Benji, was saying that most of them don't really do anything. And then in this case, just from being practitioners, we know that most of it was either incorrectly put, they didn't have enough, or they put too much of the wrong vitamins, and therefore the absorption wasn't there. And lastly, just make sure that you are getting blood tests, because you need an objective measurement of where you started, and then take another blood test 3 to 6 months from now to get an accurate measurement if you're on the right track. Otherwise, you are just blindfolding yourself, taking a shotgun, turning around 3 times, and then trying to shoot a dartboard. That's nowhere to be found because you don't even.
Well, a shotgun might hit the dartboard because it spreads, or maybe a rifle.
Yeah, sniper rifle.
Sniper rifle.
But either way, it's still
exactly.
You don't know where the dartboard is. And
I was just being an ass.
And you just spin around about 10 times, and next thing you know, you're not going to even come close to hitting it.
Chris could do it in Call of Duty, but not in real life. So
definitely not in real life.
And if that's not enough evidence, the study we cited before, there was another one that came out, I think, within the same year. It was called the Association of Multivitamin and Mineral Supplementation and Risk of Cardiovascular Disease by, here we go, another hard name, Jun Seok Kim, so someone from Korea.
We apologize if we spell your names wrong.
Chris apologizes. I don't really care. So basically, he found, though, that over 2 million subjects were evaluated with an average follow-up duration of 12 years. So there wasn't a sampling bias in the sense of the amount of years or the amount of people. And the results were very, very conclusive. So there was no evidence found to suggest any multivitamin or mineral dietary supplement reduced the risk of cardiovascular disease, coronary heart disease, or stroke. So there's lots and lots of studies like this to back it up. So these are the meta-analysis that kind of analyzed a lot of them. This last study we looked at was 18 studies that they examined, and the one before that, I believe, was 179. So that should be enough evidence for you guys to figure out that, hey, maybe if I'm taking a multivitamin or my average daily vitamin, I don't really know why, I should start to question it a little bit and maybe get my blood work done, and that could save me lots of money.
Mm-hmm.
Another big one, glutamine. Have you had any experience with this? Or I know it was kind of like a fad in the fitness industry, and people still take it, but...
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has piqued my interest years ago, but most of the time, I knew right away. I had a really good upbringing by my first coach. Shout out to Zach Evanish, and he just really prioritized and ingrained in our brains that most supplements don't work except for probably a good multivitamin and the further ones that we're going to explain. But glutamine was up there when we asked, and he basically said to us without explanation at the time, just, hey, glutamine's probably not worth your money. You probably should just work on protein and lifting hard and heavy.
Well, even with the supplements that do work, if you're not focused, like, it's very marginal what it's doing. So let's say that year to year you're growing at a certain rate. What the supplements that work are going to do is help you maybe 1 or 2%.
Yeah,
so,
it's marginal.
Yeah,
minuscule.
So it's kind of why, like, with people that we coach actually, or just that we speak to that come to us with questions or different training and fitness issues, if their first question is, what should I be taking? We actually recommend them getting everything else in order first. Kind of like Jordan Peterson, clean your room first and then try and take on the world and dismantle all its systems, supposedly.
Yeah.
Take on your own lifestyle first. Take on your training and your nutrition first, and then start to tackle supplementation if you think it could help you marginally and you really want to optimize every little facet of your fitness journey. So with glutamine, there's another meta-analysis. It's another really hard name. Amir Hossein Ramazani Ahmadi, I'm secretly Islamic, found no evidence that supplementing with glutamine improves oxygen uptake, oxygen consumption, or energy expenditure in endurance athletes. Neither does glutamine increase your heart rate, which means that it can improve blood flow to your working muscles. So if you guys see any studies that go contrary to this, look at who is actually creating the study, because chances are it's a company that has some sort of investment in glutamine itself and marketing it.
The thing about glutamine is, it's so marginal. Like, even when I was researching it, it was just as simple as basically is possibility of increasing blood flow, and even so.
Yeah, and even then, this guy found that it doesn't. But that was a long time ago, probably like 10 years ago when you were figuring that out.
Yeah, well, my coach knew right away it was all fake. Basically, he knew what was real, and like if anything marginally adds on, like we're talking like cordyceps, right? Which is fairly new. It's only like been 15 years. So, like, he would tell us like, hey, he doesn't know, like, that's it. But yeah, that's simple. But like glutamine has been out for a little while now, so it's like he was just like,
yeah,
he already knew. People, there's glutamine tablets and stuff. So like he knew back then, like those guys were taking like crazy pre-workouts and crazy. He's just like my guy was just like put salt, eat right, or eat fucking carbs and just shoot it down your throat and see if you get pump. And
people take the craziest shit. Like, I can't believe what people take blindly and they have no idea. Like Arnold talked about in or it wasn't in Pumping Iron that he talked about it, but he talked about it in some interview or something. He's like, yeah, I took whatever like someone told me was going to work. Like, it didn't matter what it was. Like, really, like, I think he said that he ended up taking horse tranquilizer. Like, that was a common thing that some people ended up taking in like the 70s and 80s when they had no clue, and people would just be like, here, take this.
Well, they didn't have any research. It was just all word of mouth.
Yeah. I mean, horse tranquilizer is good for like a good shot of adrenaline, though. You got to try that sometime. And then I know this guy who he actually trained at a gym in New Jersey in the 70s. It's still around. I'm not going to say the name of it, but he it's a really good gym, by the way. But he said that back in the either 70s or early 80s, there was this guy and he called himself like Dr. Medicine or something, or like Dr. Needle. And they would go in the back locker room, and there was like this little room, like much tinier than what we're in, probably like a closet size of a room, like a foot by a foot. And he would just sit in there, and he'd be like $5, and people would go in, and they would give him a $5 bill, and he would just inject them with something, and like they didn't even know what it was, and it was obviously steroids of a certain type or whatnot. But the point being is people had no idea what it was, and they just thought, oh, it's gonna help me grow, so I'm just gonna like let this guy for $5 inject me with something. And everyone was like all juiced up to the gills and was jacked.
Hashtag science, baby.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I guess it's not that doesn't work, but we're not talking about that type of supplementation today for our recommendations to you. We don't recommend that, but hey, to each their own. Something you talked about is just like all the fitness fads and like what your coach, when you were under his mentorship was telling you, like, he knew right away, like, this doesn't work, this works, right? And there's something that's come on the market in the last few years, and it was created before this in Eastern Europe, but it's turkesterone. And there's going to be lots of things that pop up like this through time, and there's things that popped up like it already. And I'm not saying that it definitively doesn't work, but from the clinical data, there's not much showing that it works in humans. Like, there are lots of anecdotal evidence that people believe that it's worked for themselves, but there's so much that goes into it, because there's such thing as a placebo effect where people are taking things and then it actually makes them hone in on the variables that really matter more, such as training, their nutrition. Because they're taking something and spent money on it, now they're going to hold themselves to a higher standard in terms of how they train and how they eat. So even if it were to work, it's so marginal that there's no point in spending $50 for a bottle that lasts you 15 days. Like, that's pretty much what the pricing is. And I think that it's kind of unfair that just to the average consumer, that a lot of these fitness influencers are promoting this product and saying that it's going to work really well and you're going to look like me, when it really doesn't. But I do respect a lot of the people that are very fair about it. Like, even the main guy who's selling it, Derek, More Plates, More Dates, with Gorilla Mind, he was even honest in his own videos. Everyone bought it still, but he was honest. He said if you're going to get results from it, it's going to be very marginal and you might not even experience anything. So he basically gave the caveat to people to be careful with your own money in terms of how you give it to me, and they all gave it to him anyways. So
yeah, exactly.
I mean, you can't really blame him for that.
No, you can't. He was being honest.
Yeah.
So made it. That's just how it works.
Yeah,
capitalism.
So there's gonna be lots of things that come out, guys, like this, and just do your research. And it's not to say that you shouldn't experiment on yourself, or you should, or whatever. But if you're someone that just wants to live a healthier lifestyle, build a little bit of muscle, get a little leaner, all of these supplements, even if they do make a marginal difference, aren't going to be that noticeable, especially not to anyone else, in terms of what it does to your physique.
So we get a lot of questions about pre-workouts, and just to say it right now, pre-workouts can work. Most of them aren't actually doing what they're trying to tell you, and they are definitely either overdosing on caffeine, or they're just underdosing on everything else and doubling down on things that should be working but realistically don't. So the biggest thing in pre-workouts that actually gives you that kick are caffeine, Beta-allanine, citrulline, malate. Those are probably the big three that you'll see in most of your pre-workouts, and that's most of them that's on the shelves of the market. Now, out of all those ingredients, caffeine is the major one that has clinically been proven to work.
Yeah, we're going to go into that even more, actually.
Yeah. In terms of beta-alanine and citrulline malate, there has to be a perfect ratio at a certain milligram amount of each that can provide a better blood flow experience for you, basically just increasing nitric oxide in the body, therefore allowing more blood to the amount of volume of blood going into the limbs and parts of the body that you want to. So that's what pre-workouts were meant to do. But I guarantee you, if I took your pre-workout right now and looked at it, the back of the label, that they either have some sort of proprietary mix that isn't correct and they're not actually giving you the honest truth of what's inside of it. Two, that your caffeine amount is most likely going to be at 300 milligrams or more, which in which cases you should be getting good sleep instead of taking that pre-workout. And then three is, if you're not getting enough blood flow in your workouts, I would just ask, okay, are you eating enough carbs before your workout? Are you hydrated enough? Do you have enough salt?
For most people, the added blood flow isn't going to do anything, or it's going to be so marginal because they're already going to have adequate blood flow. And if you don't, there's probably a problem you should address. That's the root cause of it.
Yeah, so pre-workouts in the category of it is reactionary, not proactive, right? So it's reactive versus proactive. And in this cases, we recommend trying to fix your sleep so you don't have to get that extra energy boost, energy kick. This is just like hey, maybe I had bad sleep one time, or I just need that little extra kick today, that one off or here or there. But otherwise, we don't recommend just every time you go to the gym and start relying on it. And then two, for blood flow purposes, that you should probably be eating sufficient enough calories, and then also enough electrolytes / hydration. So hopefully that you're salting your foods normally, unless you have blood pressure issues, then that's just according to your doctor. on top of getting enough potassium, magnesium, all your other electrolytes with water.
Yeah, I do pretty much the same thing. I actually don't do stimulants as a part of my pre-workout, and we'll go into it a little bit more later, but caffeine is the most clinically proven one. There's other cognitive stimulants, also known as nootropics, that are going to help you focus a little bit more as well, but to rely on them can be a very nasty thing as well. But in terms of my case, what I do is I try to get in a full meal at least an hour before my workout. So that's going to be in the form of more complex carbs. I might have something like oatmeal or a grain or something like that. And that's going to give me more longer lasting sustained carbs throughout my workout. And then but as a kind of a caveat to that, actually, if I don't get that meal in and it's like 15, 20 minutes before my workout, I'm just going to try to have like more fast acting carbs. So that's going to be in the form of your fruits and vegetables, something that's like higher in fructose, or even some people, they're going to rely on this. This is the very reactive part, but I've done it before, especially in sporting events, is something like a few Starbursts or something, because that's going to be fast acting. If you missed that meal before with that more sustained complex carbohydrates. And then I also manipulate my sodium as well. Stan Efferding talks about this a lot and cites all the relevant literature, but just about how the average person who is very honed in on their diet, and let's say they're eating at least 80% whole foods and eating relatively quote unquote clean, there's not going to be much sodium in those foods. And we know that as Americans that eat a lot of fast food and that are pretty fat, we there's lots of sodium in our food, and that can be very bad, especially with the lifestyle we live. We don't sweat any of it out. But on the flip side, it's actually very bad also to have no sodium in your diet. So what I do is that I have about 400 milligrams of sodium before I go work out, and that just actually drastically improves my performance because I'm not getting much sodium in my diet in other parts of the day. And this kind of helps with intramuscular swelling from like water being pulled into the muscle, and that helps as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if what this is addressing is that your lack of sleep, lack of hydration, lack of carbohydrates, and then the combination of the three will dictate how well your workout's going to be even before you step into the gym. So it is completely reactionary, and you probably should address those main three things. And if you're really trying to optimize this end of the spectrum without pre-workout, what we recommend is before your workout, you do want to get about 50% of your carbohydrate intake already done for, and then make sure that you're drinking about at least 8 ounces, 16 ounces of water.
Unless you're working out very, very early.
Yeah, if that's the case, that there are different recommendations, but overall, most people that are working out later in the day, are going to just need about 50% of their carbs minimum on top of being well hydrated, 8 to 16 ounces of water before lifting, and then making sure that you have sodium and or other electrolytes already have intake before that workout.
Yeah, maybe a little tidbit on electrolytes as well is that people are afraid of their blood pressure going up a lot from taking a lot of sodium in. And there's a lot of interesting research, and we don't have the exact studies here right now, but we could link some of them in the podcast notes. But a lot of it doesn't actually have to do with the total sodium intake. It's actually the ratio between your sodium intake and potassium. So the recommended daily allowance, which isn't always accurate in terms of what you should be taking in, but for potassium, it's 4,700 milligrams. I think most people are taking like 500 milligrams in per day. Like maybe that, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's really not that much at all. So when you're taking in a lot of sodium and no potassium, well, then that's a problem. But actually, what would be more ideal is to get closer to that 4,700 milligrams of potassium and then increase your sodium intake as well. So that balance between the two is more efficient, and then you're actually able to perform better in the gym, have a better blood pressure, and overall, it just makes you healthier.
Mm-hmm. You want a 2-to-1 ratio for potassium to sodium as an
that's
ideal.
What it is, 2-to-1. Yeah.
As an ideal ratio. So that's where the 4,600 milligrams comes from for potassium, and then 2,000 milligrams for sodium. But that was actually made for, since we ate as Americans more fast foods and more highly processed foods, that sodium came with those foods. So for you guys, the first step is just to eat whole foods first, and then once you're eating whole foods first, your sodium intake will drop drastically.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why your sodium intake is going to drop drastically, and then your potassium intake is actually probably going to go up a little bit, and then you could start to supplement with sodium and start manipulating your salt, and that's kind of how we do it.
Yep, exactly.
All right, so I want to go into now the A-list supplements. So the only supplements that don't suck for gains based on, it's all still contextual to an extent, but these are the supplements that pretty much work when you're sufficient in most vitamins and minerals already. So the first one's going to be creatine. I don't think we need to cite a plethora of studies to prove its efficacy. This is very well documented across pretty much every study that's existed. We recommend creatine monohydrate. There's a billion companies that have come out and said, oh no, you got to take this creatine for cutting and this creatine for bulking. Someone told me that at GNC when I first started lifting. I was like, I know this is bullshit. There's no way. It's the same. It's like basically the same thing anyways. So no, creatine isn't really going to bloat you that much. It's going to draw in more water though. And the way it works is, in one way, is it increases intramuscular swelling and draws water into the muscle, and that's going to help a little bit, just kind of like how we talked about with sodium before. And then another thing is something to do with like in the Krebs cycle, which I don't know the exact science of it, but it's going to allow you to maybe do 3 to 5% more output. So maybe if you can bench a certain weight for 10 reps, you might be able to do 11. So it's very marginal anyways, but still, like, it is going to marginally help.
Yeah, so creatine is the most studied supplement out there, right next to caffeine. What Benji said was perfect. So you are getting in more intracellular water, and therefore in that Krebs cycle, and basically the energy system that is used for lifting, which is a lot of it is the phosphagen cycle, which is the
ATPC, phosphocreatine.
Yeah, the phosphocreatine pathway. And all that means is that you're able to do very explosive things a little bit better. So yes, if most studies I will cite, it will be like 8 to 10 reps of let's say a bench press, that it will increase about 1 or 2 reps. So no, it is not a magical supplement of that you're going to put on like 10 pounds in your 1 rep max in like 5 days. Nope, it's just that you're pulling in more water, and with that water that you're able to output a little bit more force, and therefore since you are outputting a little bit more force, that we know in science that as you're getting stronger, that correlatively that you're probably getting stronger in the gym, therefore you are most likely putting on some more muscle.
Exactly.
That's it. It's not something to be scared about. Creatine is one of those supplements that really does work, and we're talking like I said, a rep or 2 in your 10 rep max, right? We're not talking 5-10 pounds in your 1 rep max, which is huge. But it's actually more prevalent now that we're finding out. It's more in vegans and vegetarians that they lack a lot of creatine, because a lot of meat products, especially red meats, will have creatine. And we're not saying like eating all these red meats will give you the enough amount of creatine, because there are research on
unless
that.
you just eat them raw, like Liver King. Yeah. And then like you probably won't benefit from creatine, but like
because you're getting enough anyway. So in your case, as if you are listening to this and you are a vegan or vegetarian, that creatine supplementation is amazing for you. And I do recommend all my clients that are in that category to take that supplement, because it is such a beneficial way to get it, especially since you don't eat meat products.
Yeah. And I think with creatine also, it's important to point out that a lot of people hear that, and there's this meme on the internet where it's like your mom thinks that you're taking steroids because you're taking creatine. Like, it has this almost stigma around it for like the average person. And when I started, my mom was kind of the same way. My dad's like, it's fine. Like, what's wrong with you? And I don't know where this myth necessarily started from, but people were saying that it was bad for your kidneys. And even my own doctor told me it was bad for my kidneys. I was like, and this is when it comes back to being your own doctor. I looked up the clinical studies and I didn't see anything to support that. The only thing I saw to support that is the idea that your kidneys generally don't like anything anyway. So if you're already have very damaged kidneys, you're a lifelong smoker, or you have some extreme genetic condition, 1 out of 1 million people, then you should know, hey, maybe I should just be careful about like what I'm putting through my body. But that's not even close to the average person. Like, that's 1 in 1 million examples. So I don't know where that exactly came from. It's interesting because usually it's the opposite. We're going to promote and push the shit out of this one thing to make money off of you, regardless of what it does. But for creatine, for some reason, it was becoming like this idea where it was bad for you.
Which is crazy to me, because it's one of the 3 supplements that are like highly regarded as the best supplements to take for majority of people.
Here's the one thing like you should look for with creatine if you're worried about any side effects is potentially hair loss, because there's very few studies on this. There's one that shows that yes, maybe, but it was like 13 rugby players that were studied. The idea is, I had a long conversation about this with my dermatologist, because I'm a nerd and I like talking about these things with doctors, but he was basically saying like, yes, like it's possible because the creatine could potentially convert testosterone into dihydrotestosterone, DHT, and if you have a predisposition to sensitivity to DHT, then potentially, yes, your rate of hair loss could be expedited, but you'd lose your hair anyways. So that's kind of like how it works. And that's the reason why maybe some people abstain from taking it. So just like look into that on your own. There's not much more to go into in terms of detail there. I know Derek, More Plates, More Dates, did a really in-depth video on that. So if you guys are interested, watch that. You want to get into whey protein? That's going to be like the second or third like most proven supplement to work.
Yeah, so whey protein is the most efficacious protein powder out there. It has all of the amino acids that you want in your protein overall. The reason why whey protein is the most touted and is also now the most researched is because it is the fastest digesting out of all of them. It has all the amino acids profile that you want, and that since it has both of those, that the amount that you intake, the amount of grams of protein that you intake, is most likely the same amount that you're able to digest, which is meaning it's efficient. Now, just overall, just protein itself, you want to make sure that there is an actual ratio of protein in terms of at least your leucine amount.
Yep.
Right, which is about 3-to-1 ratio in your protein powders. So whether it is vegan, vegetarian versus in this case, whey protein, but there is an actual amount that Benji
I think it's
on.
I think like with the leucine ratio. So when you're looking for a good whey protein, a reputable whey protein powder, you want to make sure it has 2.7 grams of leucine per 25 grams of protein in total. I think that's the number.
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically, that's where I got my number. So it's basically almost 3 grams of leucine per one serving of protein. That's where I got the number from. But that's what you want overall. Now, whey protein does come in multiple forms: isolate, concentrate, and hydrolyzed. All of them work. It's not that one doesn't work with the other. Just understand that the differences are slightly different, but noticeably different. So isolate does not have the milk variant in it, which is the
I don't know what you're saying off the top of my head.
Lactose. It does not.
Oh, lactose. Okay, yeah.
It doesn't have lactose in it. Concentrate does, and hydrolyzed is just a different way of how it's processed.
Well, then there's also casein, right?
And the casein's milk, derivative of milk.
Okay.
Yeah. So those are the main 3. There are definitely some other ones in other proprietary blends, but those are the big 3 on the market. All of them work. So just if you have a slight lactose intolerance, you're not getting an anaphylactic reaction to it, that taking whey protein isolate will most likely be okay. So just make sure that you listen to your body and make sure you don't get any adverse reactions. Yeah. But otherwise, all 3 of them do work, and they are great. They're not necessarily better than the other. Just make sure that you're looking for the right ratios of 2.7 grams of leucine per approximately 25 grams of protein. Remember that, or at least clip this.
And we're going to talk what to look out for, maybe when it comes to recommendations buying whey protein, because I think that making sure for your whey protein that's 2.7 grams of leucine per 25 grams of protein, so per serving essentially, and then also making sure that you're not getting screwed over with proprietary blends and they're putting all this crazy shit in it, or excess amounts of sugar or whatever else that you wouldn't want in your protein shake. Basically, ideally, you're just getting the pure protein out of it. And then also another thing is going to be to make sure that it's third-party tested or laboratory tested, to make sure they're not putting crazy shit in it. Because if you're getting a very reputable brand at your average store, you should be fine. But there's plenty of stories of supplement companies putting the craziest shit in protein powders possible. So just protect yourself by following those 3 tips. In terms of our recommendations for just taking in whey protein powder, it's definitely not better than Whole Foods, let's say, right? So when we're comparing Whole Foods and protein powder, it's kind of like comparing squats and leg extensions. I think the guys from Strong Growth Science use that analogy, but basically it's just saying, look, they're both effective, and it's not necessarily that you're not going to get the best results if you do one versus the other, but prioritize Whole Foods predominantly, and then whey protein powder as a supplement is meant to supplement what you're already taking in. So what we recommend is, on the higher side of things, eating around 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight. As long as you're eating a sufficient amount of calories elsewhere, you're not going to derive any extra benefit from really eating more than that.
Yeah. I recommend to my clients that we try to structure their entire meal planning around their meals versus getting any sort of supplement. And then as a last resort, I will then recommend about a scoop or 2 of protein, just so they can make it easier or more convenient to hit their target. But otherwise, I always recommend Whole Foods first. And then in that case, prepping protein does seem to be a step back for people, and it is definitely people are reluctant to do, but that's why we do recommend protein in the case of, especially for our office workers. You don't want to be the person that definitely microwaves fish and make the entire place smell. So for those office workers that we do work with, I always say, hey, have a bottle of protein or at least a protein product that is readily available. So you can just put it in a shaker in this case, shake it around with water, and then just shoot it right before.
Yeah, because it's still going to help induce muscle protein synthesis. It's just that we're recommending whole foods first, and then obviously, like, for convenience, this is definitely great to supplement what you're already taking in to get to that 0.8 grams of protein per pound number.
Yes.
And all right, so let's go into caffeine then, because we touched on that a little bit when it came to pre-workouts, but this is, along with creatine, I would presume is the most clinically studied and proven to be efficacious in terms of getting a desired result. So I think there's a reason why caffeine is actually banned in certain dosages on the WADA list, the World Anti-Doping Association, I believe it is, for Olympics and other sports as well, because it actually does enhance performance. You want to go into it a little more? I'm not very well versed on caffeine. I don't take it.
Yeah. So even though I'm drinking my coffee right now with a mug from one of my favorite clients, he if you can't see it, basically it says these are the tiers of my clients. So which I think is pretty funny, but caffeine is clinically researched at 400 milligrams for performance research. So for those that don't understand how much caffeine that is, that's approximately 4 8-ounce cups of coffee. And out of all the supplements for stimulants, caffeine is the best one. And it is a drug. So you have to understand there is a half-life. Basically, it takes about 8 hours to get rid of approximately about 100 to 150 milligrams. And you do accumulate a resistance to it. So the more you drink, how consistently you drink it, and how many you drink per day will accumulate over time to get the same effect as you did as if you never drank coffee and drank 100 milligrams again.
Your body gets accustomed to it. It adapts.
Yeah, it adapts until you need a higher and higher dosage. So for performance reasons, what we recommend is if you're already taking caffeine in the day, so let's say just to get up in the morning, to not get a headache that you drink already 1 cup of coffee, then maybe another cup of coffee about 2 hours prior to your workout or an hour before your workout, that you're going to get some performance benefits just because you're not as tired. And by the way, caffeine isn't a energy boosting. It is a tired blocking drug. Okay, so make that very clear. It is tired blocking. You're blocking a receptor in your brain that stops you from feeling tired. Okay, and then if you do a little too much, then I'm sure people that have tried lots of caffeine before a workout or in general, that you get this little edge of like jitteriness or just unsettledness, where you're tapping or moving around or twitching a little bit, and then the tingling comes from other stuff.
It also helps you utilize like lingering dopamine that already exists. So it's actually like taking that and binding and allowing you to, well, I mean, maybe in part that's where the jitteriness comes, is because you're very amped up. You're motivated to do things. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie Kicking and Screaming with Will Ferrell. Have you ever seen that movie?
Yeah.
Where he coaches this young soccer team and he discovers coffee, like he never drank it before, and he starts becoming a regular, and he starts getting all these espressos, double espressos, and then he does a double espresso, and then eventually they cut him off as if he was like an alcoholic, and he's not allowed to buy espressos anymore because he went absolutely insane, and he bought his own espresso machine, and he's just like chugging double espressos nonstop at the soccer games, and he's like pushing kids, and he's like, you suck, like he's going crazy. But I don't know what my point was with this at all, but basically, like, it gets you really amped up. I actually don't use caffeine because, like, everyone always said I'm the Energizer Bunny. Like, I'm a human pre-workout. I'm human caffeine. Like, yes, I would derive benefit from it, but I'd just be even more off the wall. So I'm fine without it, and I don't handle, like, withdrawal effects well of things like that. So I'm just not taking my chances with it.
Yeah, look, caffeine does work, and if the professional recommendation, if you're going to use it actually as an ergonomic effect, is to take about 100 milligrams to 200 milligrams prior to your workout. And that's in context of most people that we work with already drink coffee or some sort of caffeine to get through their day. So let's say you're the person that doesn't, which is you are already in the statistically low percentage, that you can actually have a little bit more than that. But it actually comes down to your tolerance prior to, which means how many cups of coffee are you drinking prior to this, or just caffeine in general. And then you probably want to start at 100 to 200 milligrams, and then see an hour beforehand to see how you feel for your workout. And then as time goes on, if you need, you can kind of test if, hey, like Chris, I didn't feel anything at 100 milligrams. No problem. The next week, try 200 milligrams for every workout, and then see if that gives you an actual response an hour later. But this is very individual. This is just the general average. So give yourself some time to test before you say this doesn't work or it does work. But obviously, if some side effects are jitteriness, bowel movement, it is known to be a diuretic. So just understand that you may go to the bathroom. And some people just don't like the feeling of it. So just test it first. And then you have the recommendation of an hour beforehand at about 100 to 200 milligrams to start. And then you can go up to 400 like the clinical studies. But they also say that the reason why they go so high is because they already work with coffee drinkers.
Yeah, and everyone's going to be a little different, guys. Like Chris said, another thing just with how it affects sleep, I think you said that the half-life is 8 hours, right? So it's going to stay in your bloodstream. So a lot of people, if they take it even after 2 p.m., it makes them struggle to go to sleep. So just be careful with how you manipulate your caffeine intake and what time you're actually going to be sleeping. Try and test on yourself how late you can go in the day, and then pull it back. If you're taking it after, let's say, 2 p.m. and you're having difficulty sleeping, stop taking in caffeine around 1 p.m. or 12 p.m. and see if that affects your sleep positively, and then adhere to that schedule from now on.
All right, so essential fatty acids, which are the EPAs and DHAs, and their fancy words and ways to say it, but I'll just say it for the camera because it's so cool. So the dexahoic acid, which is really fun to say, but I probably said it incorrectly.
What's EPA? Do you know that one? I'm quizzing you now.
It's like episozoic, something like that.
Yeah, you don't sound so cool anymore, dude.
Yeah, it's all crazy names, but understand these are omega-3 fatty acids that are found in majority of the time fatty fish, but they're also found greatly in grass-finished beef, which most people don't know. What it touts to do is to decrease inflammation in the body. Therefore, that's why it's related to joint health, heart health
as well, yeah.
Yeah. So
because some people's hearts are literally inflamed and enlarged, yeah.
So we're not okay. So the biggest claim that it's those two, and that's why every doctor will at least recommend some of that if there's some inflammation in the body or some sort of markers of inflammation. Here's the thing: most people are not getting even like the right clinical dosage of it, or the sourcing of it's incorrect, and or if it's rancid. So if you leave it out in the sun, or if it's too hot, that the actual fatty acids, this is for any fat profile, by the way, that it's not going to be efficacious for you. The best forms of it actually are from like cod liver oil and wild caught salmon. So if it's not saying it's wild caught, or if it's not sourced very well, then it's probably not doing anything. You're just spending about $30 per bottle. I highly recommend doing cod liver oil, and you can definitely get it on a big brand from big distributors like Amazon, but just make sure that the only ingredients are either cod liver oil or wild Alaskan salmon, and they should give you a profile of how much EPA and DHAs on the back. And what you will see is, if it's done correctly, that it is almost it's in the thousands of milligrams. And just a little pro tip: freeze your cod liver oil, because my goodness, it smells. If you take it normally and you swallow it, your breath will smell like fish.
So you can get that in like a tablet, then, right? Essentially, or like a
you want the pill form, like it's like a. It's a pill form when it's very fishy.
Gotcha.
So it's really good.
Yeah.
Definitely put it in the freezer, so then when you do ingest it, you don't have that fishy breath.
I knew it was something like what you were just saying. I didn't know all the specifics, so that's good to know, actually, because like I have taken just your normal fish oil supplement in the past, and like even the studies on that, I believe, show that what those do is like a very small amount, like if that, but what does actually work, and like we would put it more with the A-list supplements, is how you just recommended with the cod liver oil, right? Is that how you say? Yeah.
Just eat fish. Just eat a lot of seaweed, algae, all your fatty fish, especially wild caught.
Yeah, and then if you don't, just follow what Chris said, basically, as a supplement, because
it's cheap. It's not super expensive.
Yeah. All right, so then let's get lastly into the specific daily vitamins. So I know before we cited the meta-analyses of the multivitamins and all these things, that your average daily vitamin that doesn't really work at all, really, in terms of preventing all-cause mortality and improving those numbers at all. But there are many cases where it does work, and that's kind of why we have it in the A-list supplements. And that's because for the average person, It's not going to work. But for the average person that's deficient in something like vitamin D or magnesium, which I think even the average American is deficient in those things, then those vitamins dosed in the right amount, so this is all contextual here, is going to make a big difference. So vitamin D, for example, the average person is extremely deficient in vitamin D. Most of that, what we're getting, is from the sun. We live in a culture, a lifestyle now that we wake up in a dark room, we get changed, we get ready, we put our sunglasses on, go out the door, drive to work, go into another dark room. And then we expose ourselves to blue light all day, our sleep is shitty, and we don't really get any sun, then we do the same thing the next day. And if we ever do get the sun, it's in the summer and everyone flocks to the beaches and we just destroy our skin. So there's both sides to the coin there. But most people are deficient in that vitamin D, and that's when it's going to actually be beneficial to, one, first, this is the caveat here, focus on improving your lifestyle, getting 5, 10, 15 minutes of sunlight as soon as you wake up and doing that consistently day in and day out. But if you've already destroyed your vitamin D levels, it's still going to be hard to get that back to like baseline, which I believe is 75 nanograms per deciliter, something around there. That's still the upper end, but that would probably be more optimal. So when it comes to supplementing with vitamin D, the recommended daily allowance is 2,000 international units, but that's way too low. You take a lot more than that.
Yeah, so the average person's already, one, getting not enough. Two is at 2,000 IUs, that is, okay, so let me put a preface here. So I am not prescribing you this. This is a recommendation.
Yeah.
One. Two is definitely listen to your doctor. But three, we have noticed that as clinicians, that 2,000 IUs has been not enough for the average person that is deficiently low. So if we test them 6 months from now, that they are still low at 2,000 IUs.
Like my doctor was wrong, Like listen to your doctor, but question it because mine was wrong.
Yeah, and now researching it through, a lot of our fellow coaches and colleagues have been using about 7,500 IUs, from 5,000 to 10,000 IUs per day. Now, just be careful because vitamin D is a vitamin where you can go overboard. So just make sure that you are doing this with your doctor and you're taking blood tests consistently. But understand that 5,000, 10,000 per day is a good place to start. I would start at 5,000 at the low end. And if you're really deficient after a blood test, then you can probably start at the higher end of 7,000 to about 10,000.
Yeah. Basically, it's already going to be toxic if your levels are already relatively high or at baseline, and then you're taking more than that 2,000 amount. That's when above 2,000 is bad. That number, though, is predicated on someone that already has healthy vitamin D levels, and no one has healthy vitamin D levels in this society.
Yeah, so you got to make sure you get a good vitamin D3. And yes, you can get vitamin D through food as well, but it's very minuscule. Yeah. So just at this point, we live in the Northeast. So right now it's winter. It is most difficult to get sunlight directly on our skin because we're probably in jackets. It's probably snowing, cloudy, rainy, whatever it might be. So the amount of sunlight that actually gets to our skin is minuscule. So in this time frame, I am right now taking 10,000 IUs of vitamin D3 just because I know that I don't get enough sun.
And just the winter time, it's hard. You have to stay outside longer in the morning to get more vitamin D. So I'm at 8,000 right now, actually. Yeah.
Which is really fine. But I also test my blood every 6 months, so to make sure that it is at least at a healthy range, and then I'm definitely not highly overdosing. It's called vitaminosis.
Well, and here's something to meet we didn't really talk about this much, but the supplements that claim to boost your testosterone, which I mean, I'm sure you guys can already conclude just based on what we talked about before that almost all of them are bullshit. There's studies that show that being deficient in vitamin D is actually has a correlative effect with having too low levels of testosterone as well. So there's this kind of idea, and they were onto something in the 70s. A lot of the bodybuilders would say after they work out, they would get a lot of sun, that would help them grow more. I think there's truth to that, actually, because they weren't deficient in vitamin D. They had the upper end because of that. And when you're at the upper end or the upper limit of vitamin D, your testosterone levels are going to be optimized as much as it can be in regards to your vitamin D uptake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just be careful. Make sure you are definitely taking blood tests for this one. And just understand that getting sunlight, the natural way of you knowing you got too much sun in a day or in that moment is sunburn. So the difference now is the attention you're intaking it, you actually need to take blood tests because you won't know until it's too late.
Exactly. And then there's a few others as well, like magnesium is a big one that people are deficient in. We don't need to go into that too much, but basically we would recommend taking that. And actually, to preface this, vitamin D, take it at the beginning of the day because that's when you would get sun in normally. If you take it at the end of the day, I made this mistake. You're telling your body that it's morning. Bad idea. You're going to get shitty sleep. So vitamin D in the morning. Magnesium at night, I take 400 milligrams of magnesium threonate, I believe is how I pronounce it. That helps me get a better sleep. It helps me relax my brain. And I'm not an expert on that compound whatsoever, but that is what I personally recommend and what's worked for me.
Yeah. So basically, the way we used to get magnesium was through our soil and the produce that comes from the soil. So the biggest products that I can come to mind are your leafy greens. The only problem with it is, since we live in the Western society now, a lot of our soil is overproduced, and just without getting into the nitty gritties of soil usage and the amount of magnesium that is pulled out from the soil to the crops, that it is definitely overcropped to the point where your magnesium amount, even if you eat a lot of leafy greens, like you name them all, collard greens, spinach, kale, all of it, it has dropped, I think it was 60% from the from the 50s to now, just by overproduction, just so we can have it at a faster rate. So to actually get the same amount, you would have to eat crazy amounts of it. And you're talking to a person right now. I take in 300 grams of leafy greens a day, and I blend it. And I'm I'm still not getting enough magnesium. So even I'm taking magnesium glycinate at night, just to make sure I get some magnesium in through supplementation, because I definitely don't get enough. Even in my blood test will say that. And I'm exhausting it because I'm working 2 different jobs. In this case, I'm working out. Like, the amount of magnesium I need is a little bit more than the average person. So in this case, definitely that. But most people aren't eating enough food that have magnesium in it to start off with.
Yeah.
So that already is a massive thing to take over. But make sure you take a blood test on that.
So with these daily vitamins, the key thing is that they work when you're deficient in a particular vitamin or mineral. And the reason why multivitamins would ever work, and look, they can work, but here's the context to that. The multivitamins work if you're, let's say, deficient in multiple things, hence the reason it's called a multivitamin, right? And let's say you're deficient in vitamin D, vitamin C, and vitamin, like a complex of B vitamins. Okay, so there's specified multivitamins that is basically created just for you, that people do through their doctors and stuff, where they would get the proper dosages of vitamin D, of vitamin C, and vitamin B, or whatever their deficiencies are, all in that capsule. And that's the context it's going to work. And even then, we recommend improving your lifestyle in all the ways that will make it so that you're probably not going to be deficient in these things. And then also, that's going to have tons of ancillary benefits as well. Okay, so let's go into the B-list supplements, kind of that they work in maybe work or in special situations, or the literature just isn't as clear defined as it would be for supplements like creatine, caffeine, whey protein powder. So the first one's going to be your carb powders, and these do work in certain circumstances. But the idea behind carb powders is that when you work out, when you do resistance training, that you completely deplete your glycogen stores. And then it takes a long time for you wouldn't be able to eat enough carbs, essentially, to get that into your bloodstream and to your muscles for your next workout. But the studies show that it's not necessarily true. As long as you're resting within 24 hours from your workout, your glycogen stores, as long as you're eating sufficient carbs, should fully replenish. For the average person, there's going to be different scenarios if you're overreaching in the gym or whatnot. But for the average person, it's not really necessary. Just eating sufficient carbs in your diet should be sufficient. A good example where it would work, though, is if you're a world-class athlete and you're training twice a day. I know that Stan Efferding talks about this. I can't remember the coach that he actually got it from, but it was a UFC coach, and it's called the peri-workout shake. You could take it within your workout or after your workout, so in between your 2 workouts. But it was basically conceived for MMA fighters who were having multiple sessions a day. So maybe in the morning they were going to the gym, and then they were going for a run, and then they were doing a sparring session at night focusing on their martial arts. They're depleting glycogen during all these activities, and there's no way they can fully replenish them in between those sessions. So if you're someone who does 2 workouts per day for whatever reason, depending on your goals or whatnot, then the peri-workout shake, which is essentially a carb shake, is what would work. So it varies in terms of the amount of each ingredient, but I believe that it's anywhere from 25 to 50 grams of fructose. Yeah, so 25 to 50 grams of fructose, and then anywhere from 50 really to 100 grams of dextrose. And then you can mix that in there with just your basic water or almond milk, whatever, helps it taste a little good. And then you could also throw caffeine in there as well to just expedite the uptake of those things into your muscles. So you don't need to do the caffeine, but that is going to help make it quicker. And basically all that's going to do is allow you to recover a little bit more in terms of your glycogen stores for your next workout. You have any thoughts on that, really? Or have you ever tried that? Or
all the research that ties to carb powders are realistically for peri-workout, so within the workout window, and it's also made for people who are doing bouts longer than generally 2 hours. So especially for powerlifters, endurance athletes, anything where it requires you a significant amount of time and probably on either ends of the spectrum a lot of rest period, which are your powerlifters, strong men, etc. And your endurance athletes like your marathon runners, big runners. So it does help, but like I said, this is very contextual versus helping the average person. Only if you're like coming behind, like you had a long day and you didn't plan your food, and you definitely want to have something for your workout. Then yes, maybe having a carb powder ready to go, especially if you're in the car, you're coming from work, you had basically no food all day, then yes, probably adding your carb powder with your protein shake will help you. But this, like I said, very contextual.
That's like the only way it will work for the average person. Otherwise, you're not going to derive more benefit unless you're a world-renowned powerlifter, strength athlete, strongman.
Yeah.
Then it actually is going to make a significant difference across every single day, because otherwise it's just going to be impossible to recover. But for the average person listening, you probably don't need that all. That's why it's in the B category. And we'll kind of just glance over these. We already talked about it a little bit, but beta-allanine, citrulline, malate, they could help with blood flow a little bit, help you do a little more potentially in the gym, but research isn't, I don't think, so well defined. I do believe there's been sort of a push in research for citrulline malate, which is basically just citrulline and malic acid bound together. Usually it's at, I believe, a 2-to-1 ratio with a little bit more citrulline than malic acid. The malic acid is what's actually associated a little bit more with being able to do more output in the gym, and the citrulline is associated a little bit more with increasing nitric oxide, which improves your blood flow. So if you're looking to increase blood flow, then really you wouldn't need the malic acid too much in that case, because having those two things bound together is actually going to limit the citrulline. And what the upper limit where you could derive a benefit is actually at 10,000 milligrams, which is a lot. So whereas it's usually at 6,000 on a 2-to-1 ratio of citrulline malate.
Yes.
So there's that. And then fiber, like fiber powders, psyllium husk powders. If you're eating enough whole foods, enough fruits and vegetables, you're going to be getting enough fiber in. But if you believe you're not getting enough fiber in, you have some sort of disposition towards fruits and vegetables, some weird genetic thing, I don't know, then psyllium husk powder is going to help you.
You should most of you should probably just eat whole foods and get vegetables / fruit at almost every meal. But if you do that, then generally hitting that fiber target, the RDA is about 20 grams to 38 grams so per day. In your cases, just having 1 to 2 servings of fruit / vegetables at every meal will get you.
Yeah, all these things are compensatory for a deficit in your lifestyle, your nutrition, or your training. So when it comes to taking in these supplements that maybe work in certain contexts, the context where they don't work, a lot of times is when you're actually focusing on having a positive, healthy lifestyle, having good diet habits, good training habits. And the context where these supplements oftentimes do work is actually when you're not living an optimal lifestyle, training properly, eating properly. That's when they're usually working, actually. So you're spending more money oftentimes because you're not focusing on the things that are free. Okay, some other B-list supplements that are a little bit more popular is L-carnitine. So this is one that really doesn't do much. The idea is that maybe it could help you grow a little leaner or lose a little more body fat. Some people, it's incorporated in some of the fat shredder supplements. What are those really called?
It's burners.
Fat burners. Yeah, fat burners is what they refer to. Usually fat burners, and we can touch on that a little bit, is that they have things in it that either they work marginally, but they're not very healthy for you, and there's actually diuretics in it, or they just don't work at all, the things that are in it. So L-carnitine is pretty interesting. I learned about it a little more from Derek at More Plates, More Dates, and he just talked about how its oral bioavailability is so low that the studies that it's been shown to not really work well in is in part one of the reasons why. But in order to actually derive any benefit from it, which would be so marginal anyways, you would need to take like 4 to 5 times the amount that's in capsule form. So you'd just be spending an exorbitant amount of money, or you would have to inject it. So, I mean, I'm not really a fan of either of those things, spending more money for almost like no results. So I don't necessarily recommend L-carnitine. And then something that I'm definitely not an expert on, we don't know too much about it, but just interesting to go into research on, is something called Fadogia, Agrestis, and then there's another supplement called Tongkat, and these are sourced somewhere in East Asia. I don't know precisely where, but Huberman talked about this on the Rogan podcast, and the clip went pretty viral, and he was just talking about anecdotally how with his clients that had very low levels of testosterone already, that these two compounds helped. Now, I'm not anyone to say whether like it definitely does or doesn't. The studies have been predominantly done in rats, but overall, generally, your testosterone is just going to improve by following all the other lifestyle habits and tips we generally recommend anyway. So even if this is something to look into it as a last resort. Let's go into a little bit about sleep supplements. Now, when it comes to sleep, we talked about this a little bit before. It's just going to be much more beneficial to focus on the things that are free. So waking up at the same time, going to the bed at the same time, having a good schedule, being adequately hydrated throughout the day, waking up and instantly exposing yourself to sunlight for 5 to 10 minutes, maybe a little longer if it's cloudy or if it's in the wintertime, and then potentially supplementing with vitamin D as well. Then as the day goes on, expose yourself less to blue light, and you could potentially use blue light blockers, something like that, and then potentially take magnesium at sleep. So those are some of the things that are going to help. I mean, do you have any routine in terms of getting better sleep, or?
I try to do my best. You guys, just the lifestyle that I have right now is I try to get home after my clients, which ends at 8. So by the time I get home, it's about 8:30. I have to eat because I have to get 4,200 calories in a day. So for me personally, it's just hard. It's hard for me to wind down in that case mentally. But in terms of the preparation, I do a good job of wearing blue light glasses once I get home.
Yeah.
All the lights in the house are very dim. Overhead lights are down. I have like pink Himalayan salt lamps and just like very small red lights around. There's no blue lights around. And I'm basically just trying to do stuff that's very easy for me to help me go to sleep, makes my brain calm down. It's just, in my case, it takes me a little bit to actually wind down because I just had a long day, probably a 10-hour day of work. So I just need a little extra time. But I'm setting myself for success in the sense of that lights are down, especially overhead lights. The lights that are at my hip level are very dim. I'm wearing blue light glasses just in case I am around any sort of light or I have to check my phone for my clients. And then that I am doing something that's very, very low stress or very fatiguing, low fatigue. So like reading a book or reading a study, which can bore the crap out of me, even though I have to do it, then it will put me to sleep. But it usually takes me about like 2 hours, but everything is set around that.
Yeah, if you're optimizing everything else and you're still having some issues, Andrew Huberman, who we've cited a few times, has talked about a sleep cocktail, which we'll link in the podcast notes. But essentially it's 400 milligrams of magnesium threonate, which you can really use any magnesium, but this is the one he recommends. 200 milligrams of L-theanine, 50 milligrams of apigenin, and then 3 to 4 nights per week, glycine and GABA. So do what you will with that information, but that's just a little tidbit there if you're already optimized everything else. I use part of this routine, and it does seem to help me, but that's just anecdotal, so do what you will with that information. But getting into our final recommendations in terms of what you should do with this information, what you should do with your average supplement routine. Well, for one, we talked about this a little bit before, but just protecting yourself. So ensuring quality by double checking that there was a laboratory analysis or third-party testing done on the supplement so they just don't put crazy shit in there.
I just want to make sure that you have realistic expectations. So just understand that these supplements only have no more than 1 to 5%, and 5% is like in the A tier that we mentioned before, but most of them are like point something percent to maybe 1% that'll help you out.
Yeah, exactly. This is only one piece of the puzzle. So prioritize your diet, getting predominantly whole foods, eating a healthy, balanced diet. Prioritize your training and focusing on those variables before you focus on the supplementation. That's why they're called supplements. We've said this a few times and been redundant about it, but for good reason. They're supplements because they're meant to supplement what you're already doing. So another thing is with the stimulants that we talked about, make sure you don't have too many withdrawal effects and that you can handle it well. I mean, there's not too much to say there. And then just make sure you take everything. If you're going to supplement, take them in the right doses and do it consistently. Otherwise, you're just spending money on something that already only works marginally for it to not work at all. So just protect yourself when it comes to buying these supplements, because it's not regulated by the FDA. So protect yourself at all costs there, because you're never going to be exactly sure what's in it unless you do your own research. And just make sure you focus on the most important variables, training and nutrition. Lastly, just make sure go to www.thegenerationfit.com. Tons of free resources. You could join our newsletter. We send out tons of free stuff. We've got free PDFs that will help you towards pursuing any of your fitness goals. So definitely go and check that out, and have a good day, guys.
Have a good one.